In this video, you'll learn how to construct the orthocenter of a triangle. The orthocenter is the intersection of the altitudes of a triangle. So an altitude is perpendicular to the side and through the opposite vertex. So we're going to use the construction of perpendicular from a point off the line. So in order to do this, sometimes to be perpendicular, you might have to extend the sides of a triangle. For this triangle that I'm using for my example, I created it so that I wouldn't have to extend any of the sides. But just in case, if you think that your perpendicular will not hit the side of the triangle, you can go on and extend the sides using your straight edge. So to create these, I am going to bring up my tools. I've got a straight edge, and I'm going to use a compass. So to be perpendicular from a point, I'm going to be looking at a particular point, and for this instance, let's use this vertex on top. So with my compass, I'm going to put the point of my compass on that vertex of the triangle, and then I'm going to extend my compass so that it goes past the opposite line. So in order to make a line that's perpendicular through that point, I'm going to mark an arc on that opposite side of the triangle. So the real reason for marking this arc is so that I have 2 points that intersect my segment that I'm looking at equal distances from the point I'm trying to go through. So once I have these 2 intersection points, then I'm going to recreate that perpendicular bisector construction. So that first arc is just so that I can get those 2 equally distant points, and then I'm going to do my perpendicular bisector based on those 2 points. So to do the perpendicular bisector, you go over halfway and you strike an arc that goes above and below. Then I move my compass to the other intersection and I strike the arc in the opposite direction. So now I have 2 intersections of these arcs. I'm going to line up my straight edge so that I go through the point and those 2 intersections. So I want to hit both of these intersections of my arcs and the original point. So I'm going to draw a straight line along my straight edge that goes through that point at the top of the triangle and the 2 intersections of my arcs. So this line that's created is called the altitude. It goes from the opposite vertex and it goes perpendicular, not necessarily always through the midpoint. So in this case where we're working with what looks like it might be an equilateral triangle, it might go through the midpoint, but not always. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup so that I can make my other altitudes. I'm going to leave those intersection points. I'm going to leave the line segment. But other than that, I'm going to try to take away the other lines so that they don't get in the way of my other altitudes. So now that I have one, I'm going to start with another vertex. So if I start with this vertex, then I'm looking at a perpendicular to this side of the triangle. So with my compass, I'm going to do that same construction. I'll put the point of my compass on the vertex I'm looking at first. And I want to take my compass so that it's over the line and strike an arc. Alright, so this arc is not quite in the center of this one, so it might not be an equilateral triangle exactly. So once I have this arc, those are the 2 endpoints I'm looking at to do my perpendicular bisector. So I put my compass point on one of the intersections. And I just want to make sure that I'm over halfway to that other point. Then I can strike my arc using that same compass measurement, go to the other intersection and strike another arc that will cross it in 2 places. So now I have these 2 intersections and my point. I want to line up my straight edge so that I can draw a straight line between those things. So I want to line it up so that the vertex of the triangle and those 2 intersection points of that construction I just made will all fall on a straight line. And that straight line that I draw will be my altitude. All right, so that line is the next altitude. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup again so that I can focus on my next side. So I'm only going to leave those intersection points that were important to my construction. All right, so we have one more side to work with and one more vertex. We're going to look at this vertex now, and we want to be perpendicular to this last side. So I put my point of my compass on this vertex. I want to make sure that my compass is over that side of the triangle. And then I can strike my arc so that it intersects the sides of that triangle. I'm going to extend this other one just a little further. Okay, so these 2 intersection points, those are the 2 that I'm using to make my perpendicular bisector. So I put my point of my compass on one of those intersections. And I want to make sure that my compass is set to over half the length. So over half the length from one to the next. And strike the arc above and below. I move to my other intersection. And keeping that same compass measurement, strike that arc so that it crosses in 2 places. And my line segment is going to go through these 2 intersections in that opposite vertex. So line up that straight edge so that you can draw your straight line through the 2 intersections and that opposite vertex. All right, I'm going to take away some of these construction lines that don't affect the final outcome, only leaving those intersections that I was focusing on. This one got a little messy, overlapping some of those other pieces. So I want to be careful not to take those away. But notice here in the middle that they all nicely line up on that one point. That point where they all line up is called the orthocenter. So the orthocenter was made up of our altitudes, and altitudes are perpendicular to a side through the opposite vertex. So not always the middle. This looks like it's the middle of this line segment. It goes through the midpoint, but it's not always exactly in the middle because it's focused on going through that point.